State Honors Project, please welcome, join me in recognizing their talents, their skills, and again, get out and listen to some of those performances. They're outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you to Heather, who has been at our meetings before, and always great to hear.
Next, it is my honor to recognize Susanna Alvarez. You doing, Susanna? Susanna is a bilingual resource teacher at Verona Area High School. She received the Community Achievement Recognition Award from Forward Madison FC to recognize her for her contributions to local families in Madison and Dane County. Forward Madison FC coaches, players, and fans thanked her for her time and dedication to the community at a recent on-field presentation at a Forward Madison game. Did you kick the winning goal at the end of it?
We won that day.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. So congratulations to you and for continuing to inspire us all with your dedication to our students. Thank you, Lisette, for joining today. I can see you twice and helped with our supporting our students today over at the Leadership Institute downtown. So congratulations, and we wanted to recognize you here.
I was told that I couldn't say anything.
No,
No,
please. Oh,
absolutely.
the exact opposite. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this was heavy. So I was lucky enough to be born with two cultures. My mother was from Wisconsin, my dad from Venezuela. So I was raised with the perspectives, different ones. So I fight for my students, usually. And they're my Latino students, it's Cindy Larson, it's any students, it's Shad, because I have a bunch of information that I can use for that. But especially with our Latino students, and presently, due to the circumstances that we're living in our country, I am not sure that I would feel safe fighting for and advocating for my students somewhere else. So it has been made known that this is a safe place, that I am allowed to do this, from Dr. Clarity to my principal, to the bilingual team, and I really want to say thank you, because these are children that someday will remember this as something important.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We like to usually send that back to, we hope you do feel supported. If you ever have concerns otherwise, we like to make sure that's part of what we know about as well as we get to monitor tonight. Staff relationships with administration. It's important to us that you do feel what you've elevated here, and I'm so thankful to you for sharing that and so appreciative for your service to our students. So thank you. It was the least we can do is give you a standing bit of applause. So thank you, Susanna.
I will take it.
Wonderful.
I just want to confirm, just make sure we're fully on, right?
We're live now.
All right, thank you. All right.
Great.
Or else I was going to say that whole thing over. No, we're-
Well, as we move on through our agenda, of course, guests always welcome to stay. We certainly recognize the evening that you've already been a part of with us. So thank you again for your time. And we'll continue on in the superintendent's report with an advanced learning update.
Absolutely. So to begin our advanced learning, I'd like to welcome Amy and her team to the table to talk specifically around advanced learning in the Verona Area School District.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. Excited to be joined by our special programs coordinator, Lindsay Simonson, to provide an update on where we are with advanced learning this evening. Got the baton, I didn't use it. Okay. So just grounding in our presentation tonight, we know that we now have a results policy around advanced learning, and we will get to present about the data and the results for our students specifically this spring. So our goal tonight is to help ground in what does the admin rule for the state of Wisconsin say, what is our approach to our program development really been, and then kind of addressing some of the areas where we've gotten many questions from the community, as well as sharing about our team and our next steps. So that's a bit of an overview of what it is we're looking to accomplish tonight. but you will likely not see the charts and graphs that you may be accustomed to, as we'll save more of that data presentation for our actual results monitoring report come this spring. So with that, we know that the board always begins with the educational equity statement at each meeting, and you did that this evening as well. It was important to us that we brought this back for the beginning of our portion, knowing that this statement is really critical to how we've approached the work of building advanced learning within the Verona Area School District. We know that historically gifted and talented or advanced learning programming can sometimes create barriers to access for some of our students. And so as we've begun the process of building out our own programming and identification processes, continuing to come back to our educational equity framework has been absolutely instrumental in helping us to check our commitment and the decisions we're making in alignment with our equity statement. So with that, you see the statement here on the slide that really is our approach to advanced learning within the Verona Area School District. The first sort of paragraph there should not be a surprise, just echoing our R1, our mission as a Verona Area School District. That second paragraph is where we're really laying out the two ways in which we're thinking about advanced learning programming in our district. Right? It states we believe all students possess unique identities and experiences that include strengths, interests, and talents that deserve development. And some students, including those with advanced learning needs, may require additional supports to ensure continuous growth in their skills and capacity. So as we build out advanced learning programming, we're thinking about how do we develop the talents, the strengths, and the experiences of all of our students and provide those enrichment opportunities for students to opt in and continue to grow. And we also have students whose performance data suggests they may need something additional in terms of extensions or challenge opportunities to continue demonstrating that growth. And so for those students that we've identified, how are we also providing them with those supports? So a both and approach, targeted supports for those whose data suggests that's a necessity, and access and opportunities for all students as a result. And so then that last paragraph echoes our commitment to our equity framework, recognizing that sometimes barriers and inequities and power dynamics exist within the approach to gifted and talented or advanced learning programming. And part of our goal and our approach as a district in designing this programming is to be incredibly mindful of that every step of the way. So before we jump into exactly what the Wisconsin State Admin Rule tells us about gifted and talented or advanced learning programming, we wanted to take just a few minutes to ground in our overall language. We know language can be tricky and language can be nuanced. And so just starting here with, we'll often see terminology around gifted and talented versus advanced learning. Language has different connotations. Sometimes the terminology of gifted and talented can place an emphasis on identification practices. It can be seen as a fixed group of students and can be seen as really exclusive to those identified. The language of advanced learning is intended to focus on the supports and opportunities as well as the programming that we're able to provide for students. It's meant to be programming that's inclusive, dynamic, and responsive. And so when thinking about how we want to talk about this work and design this programming in our district, we looked at using the term advanced learning, feeling it as though it was encompassing of both enrichment opportunities for all students, right, with that inclusivity, as well as targeted supports, for students whose data dictates that that might be something they need to continue demonstrating growth. So questions about the nuances in language, we've chosen to move forward with advanced learning. You will often see on the state website or other districts different language, but that's been the intentionality in our language choices aligned to our overall approach.
I just want to call out and say how much I appreciate that, because one of my biggest frustrations with any discussion surrounding gifted and talented is the terminology, because it makes it seem like it's inherent to the person and not just where they happen to be today on that learning continuum. And all of our students are gifted in something, and just what it does to students who are not identified as gifted, it makes them seem they're less valuable, and I just don't like that. So I appreciate the attention to terminology, because in this case, it really does matter.
And to elevate that the terminology is not dictated. We don't have to use the terms gifted and talented. And I think there's a misconception that somehow that is an expectation that verbiage and something identified as that exists, and that is also not the case. And I appreciate that for similar reasons that Joe just shared, but that clarification is, yeah, thank you.
Yes, so thank you. So we get into the language of the administrative rule. We have a self-assessment that Lindsay will walk us through to make sure and to demonstrate what evidence we have that we are in compliance with each aspect of the administrative rule. Really to kind of summarize here, you'll see we use some orange highlights to name and to distill what the administrative rule is asking of us. The first piece is to establish a plan. Every school district needs to have a plan around supporting advanced learning, and we need to designate a person to coordinate that. We need to have identification systems in all 5 domains, which are listed there, and we'll review in just a moment. We need to have multiple measures for that identification, and then programming options as well as family participation. So this is what the state administrative rule really dictates within that. 2 important definitions that the state also provides. The first is they define access. Access meaning the opportunity to study through our course offerings, or independent study, or CSAs, or other arrangements. So really students having access to study within their coursework. And then the second piece here about appropriate programming. So when a student is identified, or we go back to that admin rule, we need to be able to provide appropriate programming. And it's being defined here for us as a systematic and continuous set of instructional activities or learning experiences that expand the development of the pupils identified as gifted or talented. Sometimes there can be really specific visions or thoughts about what that appropriate programming looks like, but really what the admin rule is saying is it needs to be a systematic and continuous set of instructional activities or learning experiences. It doesn't dictate it needs to be a certain class, doesn't need to be a certain sequence of class, doesn't need to happen at a certain location, but is really about what is the intentionality in the instructional experiences that we can provide that continue to support growth for our students. And continuing grounding in some of the language that you will see, the admin rule does call out domains of giftedness. These are widely known and referenced. NAGC, National Association for Gifted Children, often refers to these 5 domains, and these are the 5 domains that the administrative rule calls out. So you'll notice intellectual giftedness is named there, specific academic giftedness, specifically where we're looking at specific subject areas. Mathematics tends to be the first that people often think about. Creative giftedness, really about creative thinking divergently, creative problem solving, leadership, in terms of students' ability to motivate and guide others, and then visual and performing arts. We just recognize some of our students who definitely have talents in these areas. So when we think about advanced learning, often there can be an intense focus on certain academic areas, but it is important to note that it is across all 5 domains, and we have students who will demonstrate their strengths and abilities in each of these. And then finally, before I hand it over to Lindsay to help walk us through the self-assessment from DPI, we'll often hear the term MLSS, or multi-level system of support. And so we wanted to make sure to ground in what that means. So each of our school sites has an MLSS team, often composed of building leaders, school psychologists, resource teachers, sometimes classroom teachers, and instructional coaches, and they review student data regularly. It's an ongoing process, a standing meeting. And they use that data review time to determine what supports students might need to be successful. Then the supports are tiered based on the level of need that comes through that data review process. So as you see here, tier 1, those are the supports that's universal instruction that all students access. The graphic you see on the right is from the Department of Public Instruction. You see strong universal level supports. All students have access to those supports. If upon the data review, it's determined that students need additional support, then tier 2 supports are layered on. Not all students may need tier 2 supports, but some students may require that. And it's not that they require it forever, right? They may require it for a specific period of time based on what their data indicates. And then tier 3, those are the most intensive supports for a few students whose needs demonstrated. So again, on the graphic, you see a continuum of supports there at the bottom. So tiers 2 and tier 3 are really that continuum of supports. And it's meant to be a continuum. So a student wouldn't go from tier 1 to tier 3. We would try some other supports to see, do these supports work? What does the data tell us? Is that effective before we try something else to make sure that we can meet a student's need and students continue to demonstrate growth. At the heart of this and the heart of the graphic there you see is each and every student, as well as the cyclical nature of the graphic really meant to name that this is a continuous improvement process. It's iterative and always ongoing. So when we think about advanced learning, as opposed to thinking about an exclusive group, it's ongoing data review. How are we meeting students' needs? What supports are in place? Are those supports effective? Do we need to think about other supports? And what can we learn along the way? So when we think about that naming in the admin rule about having a plan, our plan for advanced learning lives deeply within our multi-level systems of support structures in our schools. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay to walk us through some of the elements of the self-assessment and how we are supporting that within the Verona School District.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. So the DPI self-assessment tool was really something that our advanced learning team utilized as kind of a framework for our design process. So we were kind of charged with trying to create the identification system and the corresponding supports for students in kind of the first domain that VSD decided to tackle, which was the areas of mathematics, as that was the specific academic area that was coming up most at the site level, both from student and family advocacy. So I'm going to talk about the framework itself and how it guided the process for mathematics, knowing that we'll also continue to use this framework to guide our identification system and our support design for the other domains of giftedness as we get a little bit further in our program design. So the way that the self-assessment is organized is into 3 buckets. The first bucket is just kind of a general bucket with just a couple of indicators. The second bucket is around identifying student need and the processes and expectations around that. And the third bucket is around programming and services. And so we'll just kind of walk through each of those 3 buckets tonight and how our team approached the design in relationship to those things. So in that first general category, there's really just those 2 indicators there. It's that we have a plan for identification and supports in all of the domains of giftedness, and that there is a designated person to coordinate that plan. And so we have chosen to embed our advanced learning plan within our broader MLSS system in the Verona Area School District. And so really there was a lot of intentionality behind that because the process for identifying advanced learning, advanced learners, and then the corresponding supports that students need to be matched with that, what's the demonstrated need that their data is suggesting is the same process that we use for looking at students who might not yet be proficient in standards. It's the exact same thing that we're using for students who are already proficient in standards. So tying that up into kind of one package and that MLSS system felt like the most coherent approach for our team and really set up our schools for success to be able to kind of own this work at the site level and be able to do that data review. So that is where the plan lives. As far as the person who is designated to support it, it's me. I support the K-12 programming, including support at the site level, so supporting principals, instructional coaches, things that might come up in classrooms, parent meetings and things like that. And then I also lead the advanced learning specialist team, which is kind of our design team for all things advanced learning, and work closely with our MLSS specialists, which are new positions that we'll tell you a little bit more about tonight. If I move then into the second bucket, which is around identifying student needs, one of the first things that our team needed to do was to really figure out what our identification system would be for identifying students who have advanced learning needs in the area of mathematics. And so one of the first steps that we took as our team, members of our advanced learning specialist team attended the conference that was hosted or sponsored by the Wisconsin Association of Gifted and Talented to be able to learn from experts in the field around best practices for identification. It was there that we learned about the importance of universal screening as an equitable strategy for identification for all domains of giftedness. But specifically, it was going to be a helpful thing for us in the area of mathematics, knowing that that was not a practice that we currently had in the Verona Area School District. And so we used that combined with looking at some other metrics that were recommended at that conference to start to come together and make some decisions about what metrics we would use. And ultimately what they were was recommended was that we have an ability screener, which was the Naglieri, the NNet3, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. That is our general ability screener. And then we utilize an achievement metric in the Verona Area School District, that's STAR, so another screening metric that we can use to collect data around student achievement in math. And then we also needed a performance or a classroom level assessment. And so for our students in K-5, that became Number Corner, which is a assessment that's a part of the Bridges curricular resource. So something that our teachers give and utilize at the classroom level, but can also tell us a little bit more about how students are doing in relationship to grade level standards in math. And then at the middle school level, we utilize IXL, which is another classroom level performance metric where we can again see where students are falling in relationship to those grade level standards. So those were kind of the three things that we selected to be able to kind of put together our overall data profile and how we would go about selecting our students. So one of the things that was important in this self-assessment tool that was called out and was definitely in alignment with our equity framework was that we needed to make sure that we were considering a lot of different identity markers and ensuring that we had equitable identification systems. And so one of the primary reasons that we selected the NNAT3 for our general ability screener was because it is a non-verbal screener that looks for reasoning, problem-solving skills in our students, and it was overall minimizing the impact of language, culture, and any prior educational experiences on a student's ability to be able to demonstrate their abilities within that particular screener. And so our team felt very confident after having time to engage with the screener itself that was, in fact, the best universal screener to move forward and most in alignment with our equity statement. So we used that, like I said, the NNAT and then those other metrics that I talked about to create a data profile for all students in grades 2 through 5. We had piloted this process in grade 6 prior to that and used the results of that to be able to then identify which students had some demonstrated need and were really demonstrating above grade level proficiency in the area of mathematics. We looked at longitudinal data for STAR and Number Corner, as well as in that single data point for the general ability screener. The other thing on this slide that one of the indicators that the DPI wanted was also making sure that we had wide representation on the design team and kind of in feedback loops for our process. And so we definitely utilized our family advisory. That was a new team that we created last year to be able to provide some input and feedback along the way. And then also created our VASD advanced learning team that has representation for all of our elementary schools last year. And then this year has representation from both our elementary schools and our middle schools on the team to be able to be kind of our design team who are taking feedback into consideration as we build out the menu of supports for our students.
Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
So it's listing that this is related to K-12, but like STAR isn't used at the high school. So can you just kind of clarify, like, who really is being, where is this data living? I'm getting the sense it's more K-8.
Yep, so
Okay.
primarily it's living at K-8. This system is being put in place for the first time this year. So we've screened students and placed them into advanced learning supports in grades. As we've screened at the end of 2nd grade, they're going into supports now in 3rd grade. We continue to monitor their data. They'll progress up through our system. We have historically looked at students in 6th grade, identified advanced learning needs for math, and those students kind of matriculate up our advanced learning supports in middle school. Once we get to high school, there is a wide variety, as you know, of courses that we can offer. And so really that identification is less of an issue because there aren't really a lot of barriers to accessing the courses that students desire and need in order to be able to meet the challenge that they want at the high school level. So you're right that the data is most closely monitored K-8. And then anytime that we see there's an unmet need or maybe a student who's not connected to an opportunity that exists at the high school, we're able to kind of problem solve through the counseling team to make sure that students get the courses that they need to get the experiences that they want.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So then if I move into the last bucket, that is around our programming and services. And so really, once we were able to assess the level of student need, right, by analyzing that data and really seeing those academic profiles, we then were able to kind of create a menu of supports that were in alignment with the demonstrated need that we saw. And that menu of supports was really important, as Amy kind of mentioned earlier, that it was kind of had 2 facets to it. The first being that we had specific opportunities for our students who were designated as advanced learners. We wanted to make sure that there were collaborative opportunities for students to be with other students with similar data profiles to engage in collaborative work with some of the resources that we have put in place in those classrooms to really engage in those mathematical practice standards, to be able to think about solving problems in multiple ways and engage in that mathematical dialogue. And then we also wanted there to be opportunities for independent practice for students to be able to think about where are they at in their own learning progression from where they're starting and how can we continue to develop them from where they're at. So at the same time, in our menu of supports, we also wanted to make sure that there were supports in place for all students. And so making sure that there was access and opportunity for that kind of talent development piece for a student who might be on the cusp or just really interested in challenging themselves in that particular subject area, and that we had opportunities for them as well. And so a couple of extra little things that we had to attend to was that all of our supports had to be offered during the school day, which they are. And we also had to make sure that they were free of charge to students, and that includes some of our secondary programming around our early college credit program, Start College Now, making sure that all the way up through our system that those opportunities were free and there were no barriers for families in terms of monetary access. And then the last part was just, again, the opportunity for parent participation. We're continuing to run our family advisory. We've met one time this year, and we're able to get their input on the current things that we have in place. They engaged with some of our resources that we're using K-5 to extend student learning, and they had a really great time actually digging in as learners and thinking about what this means for some of their students. And then we continue to invite parents in if we get to a situation where the supports that we have in place for a student may not be meeting their needs. We invite in a partnership with families for what we call SSIT meetings, which are kind of further planning meetings based on student data to be able to ensure that we have the right supports in place for their student.
This family advisory, is that a specific advanced learning family advisory?
Yeah, it is. So we reached out to principals and asked principals to nominate some families that they know may be interested in participating. And so we had representation from every school K-8 this fall at our first meeting.
That's great.
The last thing that I will just share with you is just if you're thinking about like what does this programming look like on the left-hand side of this slide. You'll see kind of some of the supports that are in place for the programming options specific to math. Students who were identified in grades 3 through 6 are cluster grouped in their classrooms, so rostered into classes with other students with similar data profiles. Excuse me, so they have access to one another and access to the resources, and it allows for push and support from our MLSS specialists and our instructional coaches to be able to coach them to utilize the resource and really engage in that deep mathematical dialogue. Some of the resources are there. And then also, while we know we don't have the full system for identification and supports for all of the domains of giftedness, we have been trying to continue to uplift the menu of options that we do have to provide enrichment and extension for other domains as well. So some of those programming options are over there on the right, knowing that, like I said, we'll continue to add to them as we get further along in our design process. All right, I can turn things back over to Amy.
So Lindsay was able to walk us through kind of the DPI self-assessment and some of the work that we're doing in the Verona Area School District aligned to that state admin rule. We also, along the way, have certainly not done this work in isolation. We've sought out collaboration and consultation with other districts across Dane County and with our DPI consultant for advanced learning as well. In that process, we have some lessons learned, right? We've learned from what's worked in other districts and what's worked in our own district, as well as some cautionary tales to help really think about how do we do this work and this design to not fall into some of the traps that have historically plagued the work of gifted and talented programs or advanced learning, right? As we noted, historically, there have been some issues within identification practices that sometimes have created barriers to access or even led to tracking, which we know can be detrimental to our students in many ways. In talking with our DPI consultant just this last week, he acknowledged that advanced learning programming across the state varies greatly in its approach. And as you saw from the administrative rule, there are certain requirements there, but there is still a lot of room for us to be able to apply our philosophy and our equity statement to this work. And so the next bullets that you see on that slide are really the ways in which we've worked to make sure that our design process can be reflective of our equity framework, as well as there's 3 core concepts there that the Department of Public Instruction also encourages teams to think about in addition to the self-assessment, but that making sure programming is dynamic, inclusive, and responsive. Again, moving away from this idea of a static, exclusive group, but that we recognize the fluidity, the changing nature of this work, and being responsive to them. So some concrete actions that we've taken to make sure that we are living out our equity framework in this work. One is implementing the universal screening that Lindsay named. We did not want a system that was solely based on one parent calling a school and knowing who to ask for to get specific supports for their student, but universal screening for all students are considered. We also wanted to use a balanced system of multiple data points to identify students. The math data that Lindsay referred to, I think we were looking at 9 different data points for each student last year, spanning over a year's worth of time to really identify trends, so as not to make one measure really high stakes, but to establish this as a pattern that the student is demonstrating a need and how can we be responsive to that need. And then providing ongoing opportunities for students to, or for our staff to learn more about and recognize what does potential look like in our students in each of these domains of giftedness, and how might that manifest in how they show up in class, what this looks like within their work, so we can continue to educate our staff and be responsive to that. Then of course, within the MLSS process, continuing to monitor our data for disproportionality and adjust our practices accordingly. And then, as we've mentioned multiple times, also provide enrichment opportunities accessible to all. All students can participate in Battle of the Books. All students have access to concept quests in their math class. If they're really interested in that concept and want to push themselves, they have access to that. And that was an important program design element for us in terms of maintaining that commitment to our equity framework. We've also gotten some questions, some kind of frequently asked questions about our program design that may differ from other districts. And so we wanted to address those this evening and share a bit about why we've made the choices that we have in terms of how we've approached this work. So one of the questions has been around teacher nomination. There are some districts that have a nomination form on their website. Families or teachers fill out that nomination form, and that's how students get identified for advanced learning services. In the Verona Area School District, we obviously value our teacher voice, and we want those teacher data points. We, instead of using a rating system that we have teachers nominate students for, we instead use student classroom performance data. So teachers are actually giving us data around how students are performing in their classroom in relation to the standards, and we use that data instead. Those are the ways in which we work to uplift teacher voice, teacher experience, and teacher judgment along the way. There are a few pieces of research here that has just named nationally. We see that sometimes systems that rely too heavily on teacher nomination can sometimes lead to unnecessary subjectivity, inequitable access. Staff may have inconsistent training, or may bring a specific cultural lens that could create barriers. That's the type of barriers that we're trying to avoid. So we definitely value our teacher voice, and we look for ways that we can incorporate teacher voice within the process, but don't have the nomination process that some other districts have as their first step to access. Another area that we often get questions or people want to know a little bit more about is the idea of a push-in versus a pull-out model. And that is referring to the location of where services are delivered. So when we talk about push-in, we're talking about supports coming into a student's classroom. A pull-out model would be taking a group of students somewhere else to have an exclusive environment specific to that group of students. We've built our model around inclusivity and responsiveness, and that is reflected in the environment in which we're also delivering those services. And so we've leaned heavily on the idea of a push-in model. So when Lindsay spoke about mathematics specifically, we have clusters of students. So students have academic peers in their classroom. Our MLSS specialist or the classroom teacher is able to go to that space, not pull the kids out to a different space, but go to that space and provide that targeted student support. It allows other students who may be interested in joining that group to have access to that group or move fluidly throughout that, that experience. It also supports a larger classroom community, and just the idea that we have students who have differing needs in our classroom, and we have opportunities for further collaboration in that. You can see there's different research pieces here that really support the idea of push-in models, how that supports an inclusive school culture. It also supports collaboration between teachers. We know we've invested heavily in that collaboration, and having teachers work together in that way is really important. It also allows for some of that real-time differentiation, so to speak. In the moment, the student needs this, and how can we pair them with the support that we've needed. So we really leaned on those push-in models. The next slide just details exactly what that has looked like. As we named, Concept Quest is one resource that we're using in math. We've targeted it for students who have advanced learning needs, and all students can access it should they choose. And some of the other ways in which we've organized our math block and the time with students to make sure that they can get those push-in supports without missing other instructional opportunities, and other students still have access as well.
Amy, I'm apologize, to get you right back on track because I know we're a little bit behind, but for the purposes, we desire that we're going to take this part of our presentation and also send it out to any families that are really interested. I just want to really lean into the last two slides that Amy just presented, because that is honestly where sometimes the most of the, it's been the hardest to communicate, and there seems to be some disconnect in understanding of how important it is that we use a push-in model rather than a pull-out model that kind of makes, as Amy perfectly stated, kind of this exclusive area for advanced learning. And when you think about the power of push-in and the power of what's being presented in those spaces, also cascade to the other learners in the space to be able to engage in the core content as we desire, but also by an advanced or elevated, or so it's core and above content in those spaces. That is crucial to allowing so many learners to be able to elevate simultaneously without pulling out. I understand, one of the dangerous terms I think in education is when I was in school. Well, this is not when I was in school statement, because it did look different, but there also, with that came a lot of exclusion, a lot of tiering of students, and that is not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to advance learners at the appropriate pace, but when they show evidence of scores or assessments or classroom practices that indicate the need for acceleration or growth, allow that to happen in the space where teaching and learning happens. So in the space where the magic has already happened, not always pulling out or not putting in a space where you create a small exclusive group and leaving other learners not to have that type of access. So just wanted to put that in there so they understand the philosophy of this leadership team around how we present it, and also just name and state, we understand that it looks different than what school may have been years ago, and that's okay.
I have some heart palpitations right now. I'm not even looking at John.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best with lots of things related to this topic. I think at this moment, all I will add is one, I know as board members, our job is to evaluate you all on how this programming comes to fruition. And to reiterate that per slide 17, the statute does not dictate the how. So to your point, if this district is choosing push in, that is the how that this leadership team feels is best. Now, as board members, we want to see the data. Clearly, we want to ensure that this is serving our advanced learners and any learner that needs more at any given time. So I do expect and look forward to seeing that this is going to be an effective way to do this. And I'll also just add one nugget to say that when you talk about sort of detrimental impacts of tracking and pull out models, I would argue it's detrimental to all students, including the ones that are pulled out. So that's just where I'll leave it right now, and we can keep talking. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thanks.
No,
Amy.
thank you.
Thanks,
It's
Amy.
important to be able to note, because I think that's really important when we think about what this looks like for our equity framework. So the last sort of lesson learned here, or area that we get some specific questions around supporting students with advanced learning needs, comes through the questions around acceleration. When we think about our MLSS structure, acceleration would be a tier 3 support after we've exhausted or students have moved through that continuum of supports and they're not able to demonstrate, those supports aren't adequately helping them to demonstrate the years worth of growth that we would expect. So we have gotten feedback that some past practices that we had here in our own district led to accelerating students perhaps too quickly. We focused perhaps a bit too much on procedural knowledge. Could students solve these math problems? And if they could do that, there were gaps in conceptual knowledge, particularly in mathematics. When these students matriculated through the high school, got to AP Calculus, AP Physics, those instructors in those departments were finding that they felt as though they were reteaching some concepts from middle school math, because students had missed some of that foundational knowledge, the conceptual understanding, the ability to apply their critical thinking problem solve, make connections, those pieces were missing. And so as we adopted our new math curriculum several years ago, that was an opportunity for us to reassess how we approached middle school mathematics with that lens. So we know that when it comes to acceleration is a tier 3 intervention and support for advanced learning needs. And we also want to make sure that there's really true mastery that involves all of those deep critical thinking ideas, and we don't want to gloss over that and place too much emphasis solely on procedural knowledge. At the middle school level, we do currently have an opportunity for acceleration in middle school for our 7th grade students. That is after students have had an opportunity to self-assess on any specific gaps that they may have. We're able to provide them some targeted support around what those gaps look like. And we've engaged them not only independently, but collaboratively in working through some instructional resources that allow for them to do some real-world problem solving and build their knowledge around the mathematical practices standards, not just the type of problem they're able to solve, but how are they able to talk, think, and demonstrate their understanding around mathematics. Once we have that and students are able to demonstrate through their data that they've met those targets, we do have a small portion of students and they're able to accelerate in math as their data necessitates that. So those were kind of some of the lessons that we've learned along the way and the ways in which we're working to be responsive to that. As Lindsay named, we didn't want to end the conversation without acknowledging the advanced learning team that has been working to design and continues to design our advanced learning programming within the district. So we do have an advanced learning team that consists of Lindsay, who really works through the program design and development, make sure that we're aligned with everything that's happening within teaching and learning. We do have 2 full-time roles this year at the K-5 level that are MLSS specialists. They really work to support our MLSS systems, the whole gamut of students who may not yet be proficient and students who are moving towards advanced learning needs. And they provide push and support in those classrooms as well as attend our school MLSS team meetings. We also then have advanced learning specialists that are designated at each of our K-8 sites. These are staff that have other full-time roles: classroom teacher, coach, library media center director, and they serve as an advanced learning specialist, meaning they come together as part of the design team to support the development of these options. That team was really critical this past summer in providing professional learning for other staff as well to build their understanding around specific student needs. And then Lindsay already alluded to our advanced learning family advisory. Our climate survey data last year indicated there was a theme amongst many of our families that they wanted further transparency and understanding of what the advanced learning opportunities were within the school district and wanted to make sure that they were available to all and it wasn't something that wasn't knowledge that was exclusive to a few. And so last spring we convened this team. As Lindsay named, we have representation from all of our K-8 sites. The work of the team is to provide feedback on our program development and inform our future direction. These pictures are from our October 15th meeting where we did engage them and gave them their students' math problems and let them grapple with what it looks like to be in 5th and 6th grade again, engaging with those types of resources. And there was a great appreciation for the multiple entry points to each of those resources and students' ability to collaborate with others around that work. And then the posters that you see here, we actually asked our family advisory members to think across all 5 domains. What supports already exist in our community, not even just our school district, but within our community, and where do we need to continue to develop programming options next? And so that process of really mapping the existing supports and helping us to think about what are our next steps in deepening this work, both again for students who are identified and for all students to continue growing, has been really impactful. So gratitude to our family advisory as well. One of the pieces of feedback they gave us was we needed more transparency in our communication, and we needed to make sure again that the information was not held by just a few. So we have launched an advanced learning website that is on our VASD website that names our approach to advanced learning as we walk through it tonight. And then you can see the advanced learning program design. Here's what the specific supports, targeted supports are, as well as here's the enrichment opportunities available to all. We've also included our local norms. We set local norms as we review that data, and we've included that on the website as well, so families aren't guessing what that looks like. So appreciation for our family advisory in providing that feedback, as we continue to go through this process to make sure we can partner with families. We look forward to adding more information to this website as we go within our program development. So finally, we have some next steps, right? We've been working on this for the past several years. We've started with the domain of specific academic areas, really leaning into mathematics. We know that we have work to do to continuing developing the systems for identification and supports for those other areas of giftedness. We also will continue to engage in that data review. As you named, Jen, we have a results policy that's coming up this spring. We've just been applying these supports, these targeted supports for a quarter. So we're a quarter in. We see what the data looks like now, how will that continue to evolve, and how can we be responsive to that to make sure that our approach is indeed having the outcomes and the results for students that we're committed to. We want to continue identifying further enrichment opportunities and continue to find ways to increase our parent and family communication and partnership along the way. And then finally, just in this work, we've also tried to draw upon the wealth of resources and research that's out there to make sure that our approach is grounded not only in our equity framework, but also in what is the research saying. So we can, again, be really intentional and methodical to avoid building a system that unintentionally creates the type of barriers that we've referenced today. So with that, we will pause for any questions or feedback that you may have. Appreciate the feedback that you've already shared so far. That's really helpful and affirming in terms of our direction and supporting our team with our next steps.
I just want to say thank you for putting this together. This is amazing. I mean, just as far as informing all the families that had questions, and may not have reached out about them, that were just wondering. And I love the fact that we're building on a website to have that increased transparency. The one question I have is for families that have questions and wonderings about their own students and how to better collaborate with the teachers in the classroom. What's kind of recommended, I guess, what recommended steps do we have for them? Start with the teacher, if you have any questions. I mean, I'm assuming that's the normal progression, but I know you mentioned some families might know who to reach out to and try to push for things that maybe aren't equitable or aren't aligned with how we're approaching this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to just put that out there. What do you recommend for any families that are wondering or listening if they have questions where they should start?
Yeah, so we did work through family conferences this year for students who are engaged in these targeted supports. We worked to make sure that their classroom teacher could provide some data around how students are engaging with those supports and what that's looking like for their supports. The classroom teacher, as you're naming, Juan Carlos, is a really important place to start. And we've also built capacity within our principal team for our principals to help gather some of that information and make sure to direct it to the MLSS team to be able to engage in that process and help to ground in where we are within universal screening. Or while we do have a universal screening and MLSS process that has a certain cadence, certainly if there is a student that has specific needs, that can happen through the MLSS team outside of that process as well.
Amy, could you just clarify what local norms are? I've heard that term a few times, so just want to ensure that there's some clarity for all of us and for families and parents, what you mean by using local norms.
So there's really two options for identification when it comes to data practices. One would be to look at national norms. So the national norm is this percentage. That national norm may be underrepresented within a district. Right? We could look at national norms, and there could be some districts that don't have any students that meet that national norm. And we know that, when we think about our students, they have so many gifts and strengths and talents that doesn't seem appropriate. And so the idea of local norms really contextualizes it within our district. So we are we're not using national norms. We are looking at the students in grade 3 across all Verona area school district sites and identifying whose data really represents an outlier that we might not be meeting their needs through that tier 1 core instruction, and they do need something else, right? If the national norms, if we're applying national norms and 60% of our students were exceeding those national norms, we really should be meeting their needs through tier 1 core instruction. We wouldn't necessarily need to apply another level of support. But if it's students who are outliers amongst our data, then that's really what we are looking at. So it's important to note then that the local norms can change, or they can be different from class to class because they are dependent on the students that are in that class. So this also becomes a student who moves into our district who may have been identified in a previous district and comes into our district. That can be a source of confusion if their data doesn't meet our specific local norms, certainly we continue to provide support. This is why enrichment is so important, that those students could still opt in, even if, right, there is, even if they weren't identified for those targeted supports, there's still other opportunities for them to access those experiences, so. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, yeah.
And just clarifying by class, we mean graduating class, so we're looking at establishing local norms across a grade level.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
So I think that elevates then, I appreciate how with a full level of confidentiality, there's a way of understanding peer groups, right? I mean, I know my learner. I don't know any data about anyone else's child, but that you have the ability to know that my learner is surrounded by learning peers, if that's making sense. So I just appreciate how that kind of uses a peer group to support one another and not making assumptions about any one student because that's the only locus of knowledge I have.
Thanks for that clarification.
I have so much to say.
I know, I'm really being careful. Yeah.
So
For those that don't know, I was a middle school and high school math teacher, so the math part. Okay.
I really appreciate the way you're going about this. I think people should understand, like, it's so much easier to just slap labels on kids and track them. Like administratively, that would be so easy to do. And to like put this sort of granular level work in, not just because it's fair or, you know, equitable, because it's actually the best practices. Because when I was in school, we all got labeled because schools didn't give a damn how you felt about it, which is why, you know, we all turned out the way that we did. And my kids will tell you that. So to see this process growing out of, you know, appropriately a different time and with different concerns, because, you know, I mean, I would love to live in a place where I could nominate my kids for things, but like I'd be nominating them for everything because I think they're great. But it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to nominate for them for everything. I just went through the college application process. Colleges absolutely don't care what my thoughts are about my kids, which was shocking to me because I wanted to tell them. So I think there's just so much good stuff here. I don't want to belabor it, but I'm curious to see how it keeps growing in other areas. As I've indicated in the past, I'm really interested in the ways that we can recognize students that want more, you know, whether they're working towards proficiency or whether they're at proficiency and trying to push higher, or whether they're bored out of their minds because they haven't been challenged and they don't even know how to express that they want more other than through frustration and outbursts. And how do we recognize that want for more as one of the identifying factors? That's kind of the key thing for me. But yeah, I think, you know, I mean, you know, it's always curious, like we recognize immediately when a student gets pulled out and labeled in a way that's harmful, we recognize that. Like, if I said to my kids, clearly I shouldn't expect you to figure this out because you're too stupid. We recognize that that's harmful. But it's amazing to me that we don't always recognize how harmful it is to be like, why can't you figure this out? You're normally so gifted. You know, it's the same kind of harm that happens. I mean, you know, different ways. So I really appreciate the process you guys kind of outlined there.
I want to say
And I
how
have
much
to
sorry, John.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
I just want to add on and say I appreciate the focus on the research that's been done in this area. I mean, since we were in school 35 years ago, there's been a ton of research on the best method of delivering advanced learning, both for the students who are in need of those additional supports, but also for everybody else, for the district as a whole. And I think it's important for everybody to know we're not just guessing and making it up as we go along. It's based on objective science on a subject that's been studied for decades. And so I really do appreciate both the focus on it and the citations to it, to know that this is really data-driven.
That was going to be my note, to encourage people to read some of the things that you've linked here. They're super impactful, and I think it does kind of disentangle some of the things that we might reflect on from our own experiences. And I admit I'm doing that from having taught math for 20 years. But yeah, the resource list is really insightful. So thank you for sharing that.
Will you also attach resources to the website? Okay, great.
Yeah, we haven't
See,
started
part of
doing,
it's just so many people are stuck in the past, right?
actually we have a few links on there, but certainly can make that more robust as
Yeah.
part of the family and community education around what that
Right.
looks
So,
like.
This is the why, you know, obviously what we explained, then it's the data that backs it.
That's great. Thanks for coming.
I also would add one more thing, as a parent, I can be pushy. As a pushy parent, like, one of the hardest things is to recognize, like, when you go out and push your kids and get them in that group that is more aspirational than like practical, like you're playing on the more advanced sports team or you're doing that, like, the kids look around and can see that they're failing at that level. And like, one of the hardest things as a parent for me has been to like temper my natural pushiness, because like, I would push my kids and then they'd be like surrounded by people that are maybe a notch above, and they know that, you know, even when they're like 8 or 9, they know that, right? And then you just set them up for more damage, a la 1990s education. So, yeah, I'm just throwing that out there because I'm sure other parents can relate, but, yeah.
Well, thank you. Really
Thank
appreciate the
you.
opportunity, and got work to do, and we'll continue working on that journey. Excited to share the results this spring.
Yeah, thanks for elevating this prior to results. It's really important, as Juan Carlos said. Thanks so much.
I can't wait to hear how we do it
Yeah, for other domains.
the other domains.
We're interested too.
Yeah. Yeah.
To figure it out.
Moving on in our agenda to public comment, I am not aware of any, and I'm gonna do what I do and make eyeballs at Lori. Okay, great, thank you. So no public comment this evening, so we'll move along to board action. First piece of board action is our monitoring of OE4. So a couple of quick reminders as our team comes up that will be helping to present. John will be taking notes for us this evening in terms of our discussion related to the monitoring report. There is a video that was put together by Rochelle, who's approaching right now. So that is available to the community. That gives another kind of overview of some of the pieces of this, and for the community to know again that we've had access to the full reports related to this monitoring report. And we typically get some high level reminders here from our leadership team, and then we'll have space as board members to discuss and share questions. Welcome.
Great,
Thanks for
you.
being here.
It's nice to be here today. So OE4, I just want to highlight and celebrate that OE4 is our reflection to the commitment of personnel administration. It is the work that our community supports, that our amazing employees do, and the commitment from the board to allow us to make sure that we're doing what's best for our adults. I want to extend our appreciation to you, the board, for allowing us to do this work. We can't do this work without you. Our staff cannot do this work without you. And I appreciate you for that. OE4 was developed by the board, and what it states is that it requires the superintendent to assure the recruitment, the employment, the development, evaluation, and compensation of all employees across the district so that we can receive and achieve our results policies. That's kind of the nutshell of what OE4 is. It is a long OE with multiple indicators, which is why we've switched to a video presentation for a majority of these pieces. Otherwise, I would be here for an hour talking about each indicator. What I want to celebrate tonight is that all of the indicators have been met. That is a part of the amazing work that we've been able to do. I think it's important to go into a little bit more on some of the leadership moves, highlighting some of the important pieces that we've been able to do this last year. Within culture and engagement, which primarily falls under OE 4.1, we have implemented rounding across all levels of the organization. Dr. Clardy launched full-day superintendent listen and learns, which were open opportunities for our staff to come in. He would sit in a space in a building with an open door. He was available all day, and staff were able to engage with him, to ask questions, to understand more, and he was able to use that data to really help him make leadership decisions. We also continue to celebrate the employee and student advisory committees and how we're using their feedback to develop further things. And one place that we celebrated this year was allowing and using our advisory committees to inform our annual survey design that really ensured that our feedback and our guides helped prioritize the leadership moves that we needed to be able to make. Within leadership development, OE 4.10 and 4.11 We expanded our principal designee program this year with structured learning and mentoring opportunities. We've increased internal promotions and leadership readiness across many of our departments. We have used employee voice and collaboration to strengthen our relationships with VA, EA, and VESPA, ensuring that our student voice informs decisions on staffing, wellness, and compensation. And within these two sections of leadership moves, it's great to celebrate that our turnover has been the lowest in many, many years. Our employees are celebrating the legacy of the district by staying here and creating their own legacies. We have some of the highest employee engagement and indicators that we've seen to date since OE4 has started, and continue to thank VA, EA, and VESPA leadership for the collaboration. We are not able to do this work without the relationships that we built. So thank you. System improvements, I think like it's important to highlight these pieces as well. Every day is an amazing day. I live in the joy of our accomplishments, but there's also areas that we continue to do better and continue to grow in. Employee wellness and benefits has been a huge step for us this year. We had to make the hard decision to go out to bid for health insurance. And while difficult, we were able to expand access to our employees to a broader network and had the amazing opportunity with your support and our community support to open up the employee housing clinic. Within data security and confidentiality, we learned that we needed to tighten our Google workspaces. We have implemented automated alerts that protect social security numbers and credit cards from being shared. And with that, we have built-in processes so that our tech department is notified immediately when our systems are seeing data that may be questionable and that we have to research further. We also continue to celebrate and lean into accountability and due process within OE 4.7 and 4.13. And that is the work with Nate and our director of compliance. He is a partner with our work with all personnel administration. We can absolutely guarantee 100% of our investigations are completed in alignment with due process, district policy, and handbook standards. And we've taken it a step further to make sure that we are documenting them well. We have a consistent path forward, and we're able to look back to see what that has looked like for us. Which is, I think, some of the work of tracking our investigations as we see more questions come up. We are confident in responding to what has happened in the past and know that we can respond to questions in the future as well. There are also areas that we are hoping to make improvements with the board tonight. We have two indicators that we're hoping to bring forward for consideration. One is 4.13. The current language states that 100% of complaints reported to the superintendent's office were thoroughly investigated and actions taken in alignment with policy guidelines and legal regulations. We believe that there are complaints and investigations that are not reported directly to the superintendent's office that still need to meet this indicator. So we are asking for you to consider changing it so that any reports to district administration are thoroughly investigated. That is a
frame that part. We would like to, we do the indicators. So just want to frame it in the sense that, but also an awareness, but that does have to meet the approval of the board, but it's our proposal to the board to do the indicator piece of it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
So that is a piece that we are hoping to expand. The other one is the definition of section 4.11. That current definition states that the superintendent, consistent with their own evaluate all employees' performance according to their contributions towards achieving the board's results policies and their compliance with the board operational expectations. We know Dr. Clardy cannot evaluate all employees. And so we are recommending the proposed definition that he will ensure all employees are evaluated rather than evaluate every single one.
All those.
And go.
And what we can share with you is that these are very minor changes, that does not change the work that we've done. We haven't been out of compliance with businesses. But we just want to make sure that going forward, that the language actually aligns with practice and process rather than the opposite.
Can I just ask real quick on the proposed indicator change? I'm just looking at, and I think this is just a typo. I think you have an extra. You've gone from 100% of complaints reported to the superintendents to 100% of complaints that align with policy guidelines or legal regulations. That's later in the indicator.
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was unintentional, because as it's written right now, it kind of reads like the complaints have to be written in a certain way.
That's what
And
I
don't
would-
think
yeah.
that was what was
Right.
intended.
That is not what is intended. So we can change that language to 100% of complaints reported to district administrators.
Because that's really the emphasis of the change, right? Is it doesn't matter that it goes specifically to superintendent. We want any complaint to any district administrator to be elevated to the level of this OE.
That's right.
So all that's changing is superintendent's office is changing to any district administrator, including what's in the current paragraph. Okay,
That's
thank you.
correct.
I have just a comment on the parent articles. When we have that, the et cetera, I think always is a little bit more much. I don't, if we just list superintendent, principal, assistant principals, assistant, just list out who it's reported to. Because I know like superintendent's not listed in there. I just want to make sure that we have clarity on who's included, without the et cetera. Because
I think that's absolutely reasonable. My wonder is, as we have changes in potentially job titles,
that
we
makes
want to be
sense.
very clear on updating this annually, or are we comfortable saying district administrator encompasses all administrators and not just the superintendent?
Yes, I think, I just want to make sure that there's like a full understanding of who that means, just for us. Something just to think about, and some of that needs,
I wonder if that, thank you for looking that up. I wonder if that would mean adding a definition, we put that in the definition area,
yeah,
and then put a word that describes that in the definition that would have a description of all of our cabinet or district administrator,
that would
building
be,
principals. Yeah.
that would be, I think that would be helpful, because I think we talked about how district administrators are different than the superintendent, so we want to include, make sure superintendent is included, and but having a definition might be the easiest way to address that. I like that.
Thank you.
With that, we get through some of the important highlights, the growth areas that we've had this year, the proposed changes, and open it up to you all for questions.
Thank you as always for the rich data. As you said, the evidence is robust for this, and I so appreciate being able to just have that access and the transparency with the community too for leisure reading, as folks might be curious about the depth to which you're bringing evidence to us to say that these indicators were met. I think this OE is a little bit different. We tend to talk about OEs being a bit more checkboxy. You know, some of it is very just, are you doing things that you're tasked to do to keep the district functioning? This one is personnel related. So that humanness to it just feels so interesting because it is hard. I'm not in denial that the indicators are met. I'm not in denial that there's factual information that can be brought. And we're still talking about human interactions every day with staff. So I think I say this maybe every year, but it doesn't always get captured here, but just ensuring that culturally, philosophically, we're being proactive in dialogue with staff. When changes are coming, whether they impact an individual or a broader scope, that we're always trying to be as proactive in communications. I think some of that gets captured in survey data, but you know, the pieces that really don't, I appreciate you being able to share that. I appreciate the commitment to this team, how you've elevated the partnership with BAEA and VESPA, but just acknowledging that there's so much more beyond this that is not quite a data point or a quantitative piece that lives beyond this report, but I know that this team takes and holds in high regard.
Thank you.
Any questions, board members, for Rochelle or the team before we start to shift the report into our hands for the meeting expectations conversation? Okay, well, with that said then, we have received our reporting around OE4, so I'd accept a motion to accept and approve the report as presented so we can begin our discussion around meeting expectations.
So moved.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any now discussion as to whether we feel this report meets expectations or does not meet expectations, and commentary alongside?
I don't really have much to say. I think it was a thorough report.
Yeah.
I like the video presentation method. We've talked about that with other reports. I think the report meets my expectations.
Thank you.
I like the video format. Kind of the pre-work leading into it.
Mhm. Yep,
Gives us
and
all
then
the
it leads
information
for,
we need, we get to view the reports, and
Mhm.
it makes this a little bit more concise.
Well, and that board members, I appreciate you all taking that advanced time to look through things. So then the scope of our conversation here is really around questions and discussion and not having to rehash all of the information.
I appreciate just that there's so much work that's been done and seeing it all kind of combined in one space. Thank you for everything. It's really, really impressive to see all of the highlights. Really encompasses a lot of hard work.
I think to that end, I'd say one of the things I liked was the executive summary of this report. Was like very concise to the point. I could read it, understand exactly what I needed to understand. And most importantly, there's clear linkages between the kind of more qualitative statements about how the district is doing well in this particular area of retaining people, attracting people, and that sort of thing, and the more checkboxy kind of, these are the indicators below, which is exactly what I've been wanting out of, those executive summaries, is that kind of connection between the checkboxes and the like felt and lived outcomes. So I thought that was really good.
I also think it's kind of a good support for the shift in how we've approached these reports. That, I mean, the report that's given to us is a whole breadth of information, not just this is what the indicator says, this is the evidence showing whether I check that box or not. Like, for example, looking at the key improvements, achieved the lowest turnover rate in years, which I think is such an important piece of information tied to what this OE is really communicating that otherwise maybe wasn't necessarily communicated directly in an indicator. So I'm really happy with this relative to kind of this shift in how we approach OEs.
Yeah, the language just feels right. Like a good, comfortable blanket, right about that.
So Juan Carlos, you are our motion, correct?
Yes,
Would you like to amend your motion to approve as meeting expectations?
I would.
Okay, and the second was John?
Yes.
John, do you
Me,
still
John.
second that motion to approve
Yes,
this
yes.
as meeting expectations? All those in favor of approving the OE4 report as meeting expectations signify with aye. Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Oh, I'm gonna just keep doing that now, just in case. All right. The report is meeting expectations. Thank you, John, for taking some notes for us, and we'll attach those as comments to our report. Thanks so much, Rochelle, for your time. And then moving on to one more piece of board action. So this is our second read officially for the proposal. Thank you again, Joe, Nate, for having eyes on our GC11. So the process for addressing officer vacancies. So that got linked into board docs. That encapsulates a little bit of feedback that we talked about last time. So remember, we kind of committed to the one avenue versus another. We had, so there's the choices brought from Joe last meeting. So given that this is a second read, please make sure you have given it a second read. And then I would accept a motion to approve our new GC11 officer vacancy policy as written.
Just to be transparent too, at the last meeting, we talked about adding some additional language too about what to do in the event that both the president and vice president are absent, that's been added in as well, consistent with what we talked about last time.
Thank you. Thanks again for drafting all of this. Any further questions or discussion or a motion?
We actually need a motion to approve it at this time. Okay.
Yeah, because it's our second read, so if we can take that motion and move this forward if we.
So moved.
Thank you, Meredith. I was going to do it, I'm like, I can make motions, but sometimes I just kind of don't. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corby. All those in favor of approving GC 11 as written to be embedded into our policies as a board, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, GC 11 has been adopted. Moving on to board updates. Do you have any board updates? Does anyone have any board updates? What's the good word? Who knows great things?
I went to New Century hosted their first STEM Fest on Saturday.
Oh.
It was incredibly well attended. I couldn't believe how many people were there. It was a mixture of booths from like community groups, students had created their own video games. There was a booth where students were showing off robotics and things, and then also different areas where students could kind of create. So it was a very cool event, and I liked it.
Awesome, thanks for attending, thanks for sharing.
Are they gonna make it an annual thing?
I think that's the plan.
Because it was open to anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. We couldn't make it, but I really wanted to next year.
Very good. Yeah, we always talk about how do we all keep knowing about all the things? It's impossible. But, any way we can keep, as board members, knowing all the things, I like to know.
I'm waiting for.
The things to attend.
Agent AI.
Right? Calendar agent AI. Wonderful. I do have a couple of updates, but they're specifically related to calendaring, so I'll just save that for future dates if there isn't anything else for general updates. And then moving on to the superintendent's consent agenda, please make sure you looked over and read through. Are there any questions? Hearing none, the superintendent's consent agenda is approved as presented, and the board consent agenda similarly ensuring that you've read over our minutes from last meeting. Are there any questions? Hearing none, the board's consent agenda is approved. So again, for future dates, just highlighting again, as we talked about as Shana was leaving, that our next board meeting right away on the 17th of this month will reconvene again at 5:30 to start the meeting with workshop and then feed into our regular board meeting. So again, if you have any insights or thoughts, please email me individually. Anything that you want to ensure kind of comes back as we begin that time with Shana on the 17th. And then please hold as well December 1st. There will also be an opportunity for a 5:30 p.m. Are we telling?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Welcome Center is going to be opening here at the high school. So if you'd like to come by at 5:30 prior to our meeting and get a little tour with Ms. Stanley of the Welcome Center.
Yeah, the family center.
Family Center, thank you. Welcome Family Center?
Yes.
No welcome.
Yeah, they are.
Just
All
families.
families welcome.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So make a note on your calendar as well. We'll send some information. I'm sure Lori and I can partner about calendaring, but just hold that time as well for December 1st at 5:30. I think that's all I have for future dates and reminders. So I guess I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Meredith. Second? I'll second. I get to be in the minutes. All those in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Attendees, leadership, board members. Thank you.
So, Jen,